Greetings! This is a short overview of the immune system, specifically Standard 12.5, which you'll be writing your essay on. And we're just going to kind of draw some pictures and talk our way through how our bodies fight against invaders. Let us start off with a virus. And I'm just going to put a V there for viruses. Viruses have proteins on their surface called glycoproteins. And those are really good at matching up with cell receptors and convincing the cell to let the virus in, kind of tricking it. So here is a cell in a body. Let's say it's a human body. And it's got a little receptor that matches that virus. So when that virus gets the receptor and they lock and match, it'll welcome the virus in. The virus has DNA or RNA, depends on what kind of virus it is, that programs the cell to take it over and to start building millions of viruses. And those viruses start to leak out of the cell, and eventually the cell is going to burst and millions of viruses are going to spill all over. So here are millions of viruses spilling all over the place. We have a virus factory churning out cells before it blows up. And this is chaos, because these cells are going to spread out. If it's a cold in the throat, they're going to spread to other throat cells and infect our throat. So, the question is, how does our body fight back? I've had colds and I've gotten over colds. So the question is, how did I get over those colds? First line of defense we have, besides things like our skin, the first cell line of defense, we have these big munching cells called macrophages. So I'm going to put an M right there for macrophage. And they don't know what kind of virus this is, but they do know that this doesn't belong in the body. So anytime anything comes into our body, bacteria, fungus, something that doesn't belong, macrophages will try to find it and eat it. And by eating it, they ingest it, and then they digest it with some enzymes and lysosomes. The other thing about macrophages, which is kind of weird but kind of nice, is they will display parts of what they have eaten on their cell surfaces. So this is a little bit of a digested virus. Let's imagine that virus goes into that macrophage and the macrophage consumes it, and now it's presenting that. We call this piece an antigen. Okay? It's a part of anything that wants to invade and do damage to our body. Those are pathogens. So this pathogen over here, it could be a virus, could be a bacteria, but we call that a pathogen. And a piece of a pathogen is an antigen. All right, next up, we have cells called helper T cells. All right, and what they're good at doing is finding these macrophages and connecting up with them and learning the exact structure of that antigen. Kind of the way that this is a part of a protein, how that protein is built. What is the sequence of amino acids, and in what order is it folded? When helper T cells do that, and that might take days to learn, they're going to learn the structure of that. They can then take that information and tell a couple of other cells that are hanging out in our lymph nodes in different spots in our body. A helper T cell first, we're going to do this first, is going to go find a B cell. All right? And it's going to say, hey, B cell, here is what this antigen looks like. And the B cell is going to be like, oh, wow, this is terrible. We do not want this in our body. So the B cell divides into two types of cells. One type is called a memory cell, and that memory cell is just going to remember what that antigen looks like. And if that antigen ever comes back into the body, the memory cell it's ready, man. It's waiting. It's like, we are going to destroy this antigen if it comes back. Bring it. Bring it, antigen. Bring it. The other cell is called a plasma cell. And plasma cells immediately get to work. Memory cells just chill. Plasma cells start creating little Y-shaped structures that we call antibodies. So here come millions and billions of antibodies. Okay? Antibodies are made by the plasma cell once they learn this antigen shape, and the antibodies are specifically formulated to latch on to this virus. So here I show antibodies coating the spikes, the landing gear of these viruses. They can't land on anything anymore. The other thing about antibodies is that they link together. So now I begin to get clumps of antibodies all stuck together, and the macrophages love those giant clumps. The macrophage is going to come and see this big container of viruses and antibodies and just going to eat that thing. All right, so we got antibodies fighting the viruses. The other thing that helper T cells do is they present the antigen that they learned from the macrophage to another cell called a killer T cell. So a killer T cell also spends some time learning what is the shape of this antigen. And it will divide into hundreds of thousands of killer T cells that all know this exact shape. They'll pour out of our lymph nodes, come flying out into the cell, and here is the cell. And when the cell's infected, it has a way of letting the body know, help, I'm infected. And that's what cells sound like if you can listen carefully. Help, I'm infected. Help, I'm infected. And this killer T cell can recognize that symbol, and what it will do is it will release a lot of cytotoxins. Okay? One of them is called perforin. And those cytotoxins are a signal to the cell, hey, you should die because you're infected. And the only good thing you're doing right now is cranking out viruses, and that's not good. It's bad. So this virus says, you're right. Sorry, this cell says, you're right. And it falls apart. All the organelles dissolve, the cell membrane shatters. It basically commits suicide. It's cell death. And it falls apart, and now it's no longer making viruses. And these killer T cells, they're going to all the cells that are infected, and they're wiping them out. So now that we have the antibodies to clean up the loose viruses, and we have the killer T cells to clean up the infected cells, we win. We live. We survive. I'm still here today because my body has done this hundreds of times against viruses that have infected my body.